How are you doing, Internet? I'm Beanuts, and today we'll be taking a look at the figure complex Amazing Yamaguchi Revoltech figure number 4, Spider-Gwen. And if that's not a big enough mouthful, take a look at what comes in the box, out of the box. Except I seem to be missing something. Would you take a look at that? I should also mention that I got this pre-owned from Amiyami. You may be wondering, seeing as how Gwen here comes with the stand, whether or not she can stand on her own. And yes, she can indeed do so, although it takes a little bit of finagling to balance her so that she doesn't fall, seeing as how her feet have an irregular sculpt, rather her shoes do. So she can be difficult to balance there. But once you get it, she does stay there until you kind of topple her. For those who don't know Gwen's background, she is an alternate version of Gwen Stacy from a universe where she gets bitten from the spider instead of Peter Parker. Peter goes insane, becomes a villain, she accidentally kills him, and then the police, including Gwen's own father, start pursuing her because they consider her a criminal. And this backdrop actually comes out inside the box, and it is nice to see that there's something there that gives more expression to the character of Spider-Gwen, or Spider-Woman as she's known in her own universe, including there in the bottom panel you have a billboard, "Stop the Spider-Woman," and then the phone number for Peter. And that's a campaign that was started in order to support those who Peter left behind after he died, even though he was the villain in that situation. And Spider-Gwen was first introduced in the Spider-Verse event, where she actually met Peter, and the rest of the Peters, within that event, trying to fight Morlun and the other ancestors. And she became her own character with her own series, as well as a place within the main universe storyline. And I do think that she is an interesting character. She is also, as indicated before, the fourth of these Amazing Yamaguchi figures that were produced. So there were first Spider-Man himself, Venom, there's also Wolverine, and now Magneto. And I believe that what they've done is they have tried to improve their sculpting techniques to make things look more natural. So with the other figures, people complained particularly about the sinewy muscle sculpting in the legs and arms sometimes, as well as the elbow joint here, this double barbell, and how it was so obtrusive on the other figures. Here, it's still there, of course, but you can have it like that so that it's much less obtrusive than on the older figures. So that's still going to pop out, but if you want to have the kind of posability you need on a spider-themed hero who can do all these different poses, of course, you're going to sacrifice some of the aesthetics. Speaking of posability, you do have a very good system of joints that offers you some pretty good ones for pretty much all the movement you would want, while also having the look of a premium anime figurine. So you can look up that far, and the hood goes back like that. Also a bit separately, it's attached to the side of the head with pegs there, so it can go forward and back slightly. You do have to try to keep it in place as you're switching the heads. The neck itself, it can look up really far, and then you have a really long neck. Everything can go down and forward really far. Then you have a gap in the back but certain gaps can't really be avoided. And you've got tilt side to side. Really wouldn't want it to go all the way around anyway. Chicken neck. She can look all over the place, at least with the normal heads, or normal faces. Then with the arm, can go up that far, all the way around using that double joint, as well as up and down, slight forward and back. But really, how much are you going to need in an arm? Single bend joint. And it's really close to, say, a Figma joint or any one of those. So you can have that tilt, and then to get it to a different direction, you just spin it around. The body has a cut over here, just below her bust, as well as one at the waist. So this one at the top, don't really expect it to go very far. And backwards, or rather, that's backwards, this is forwards. So that's pretty good. And then the waist again, forwards and backwards, also really far. And can go around 360, although it feels like it's kind of a risk doing that all the way. Then you have the legs, which are kind of complicated. You've got the cut up here, lower torso, plus one for swivel here, plus these Revoltech joints. And if you don't have them facing the right way, they will not bend that way. But if you do have it, then you have that nice ratcheting bend. You can go all the way. And of course, since these are cuts, they both swivel, and that creates a bit of a challenge too, because you may not at first be able to tell which way around is right, but there's really only one certain way, or a few certain ways, where those joints will align properly. Otherwise you're going to end up with gaps and it won't look right. So again, great in the knee, and you've got similar joints in the ankle. And if you want that to tilt, again, you're going to have to turn it first. And then you've got the toe, comes up that far, really far, and down almost 90 degrees or so, which, considering that's supposed to be a shoe, is really kind of on the ridiculous side. So you've got all of that flexibility, which of course is important in achieving those poses that Spider-Man and all the related spider people are known for. And I should also talk about her appearance. And I do think that her sculpt is great. That feels right. So it's easy to put her back together if she falls apart somewhat. So sculpt and the painting job are really well done. It is an interesting costume as well, and I think that in a lot of ways Gwen surpassed Peter's own design. You have some nice pink and turquoise in there, as well as the white and the black, which sets her apart, as well as the stuff around her eyes, which accent them. And that's also very different from traditional Spider-Man costume designs. But you also don't have any mouth features, so that's very much like it as well. And there was a bit of scuff on the shoulder, but I was able to wipe it out. And considering that I got this pre-owned, it's in some pretty great condition here. Also, I like the shoes another unique feature to Gwen's costume. Moving on to her accessories, you have the basic kind of stand that comes with a lot of these types of figurines, and it has the standard 3-inch hole or peg in there, as well as this head for displays when you need a 90-degree angle in order to hook into Gwen's back properly, as well as the clamp type that also comes with Bandai Tamashii Nations. I don't really like it as much because of the pegs that come in from the top, so they can also pop off fairly easily. But if you had to use it, then you had it there. You have this one, which is, you have a ball joint peg, and it's on a pretty powerful magnet. So I had that on my mic holder, and it was hanging on there pretty tough. Anything that's metal, you can attach it to my scissors. That clicked on pretty well. And about my letter opener, I guess that means that's metal too. Then you have all the rest of these. And as you can see, you have an assortment of hands, some faces, and some webbing. Alright, so I've made a bit of a mess for myself, but I am okay with that. So the first thing I'd like to draw your attention to is this little easily lost, easily dropped smartphone that they made. And they put some pretty nice detail here on the screen, some pretty detailed text. There's a special hand dedicated just for holding this phone. Okay, according to the instructions, I didn't even have the correct hand to put that in. And this was the one that I was using. This is the one that I should have been using. So it's kind of almost pointing, but the bottom 3 fingers are kind of weird. So you just take it one corner first, and it should slide in. That's not going to drop it. So that is a hand that we can give here. We've also got these 2 open hands, open slightly actiony. And of course, switching hands is fairly straightforward. It's like switching hands on any other figure. You just pop out the one that you don't want to use and pop in the one you do. And now Gwen is busy on the phone. Now this was one of the basic hands. You've also got 2 thwip hands with holes for the webbing, half holding hand, and this pointing hand. Pointing kind of rock out. We have this curling web with some very nice details in there. Hopefully you kind of can see. This end has kind of clear peg there. Oh, okay, so this curling one is more for these clenched holding hands. And that's for when she's web slinging around. So you can use it that way. Then you have this even more curling one. And that has the coils just like the other. You can see the sculpting better like this. And it's got that hook there. So right away I'm going to go to this holding hand. There we go. So you can have it out like that. Maybe turn it around if you like. Yeah. And that's pretty neat. And with the thwip hands, you have this straight webbing. That's more like a web shot, isn't it? So she's either shooting off something to make a web line, or she's shooting it off to trap someone. And there we go. That's one. It's unfortunate that this figure doesn't come with 2, otherwise you'd be able to do the double load. However, I have heard that if you have the Amazing Yamaguchi Spider-Man, you could use his with her. If you push that in more, then she would obviously be able to hide that a bit more. But that is what that looks like when it's on. Most of the way, anyway. And then if we take this one, which is slightly more solid, so it's easier to put on. Kind of like that. That's not bad either. Probably one other thing I should mention is possible. Say, instead of attaching it to her back, for like I did in the beginning, you can attach it to her front, and she can be crawling up a wall, sort of. So she would be attached that way and have her arms and legs free. And the last thing to show and switch around are the 3 faces. So you really have 4 within this figure. You've got the normal one that she comes attached with by default. You have the serious squinty eye one, like that, the surprised or skeptical one, and then you've got this really Bishoja style unmasked head. And you can see she's got her black headband on, and she's kind of smiling. And taken on its own, it is pretty. But there is just one problem with this when taken with the rest of her, as we'll find out in a moment. Now, in order to switch the faces, you're going to have to force that off. And the first time that I tried this, the hood also came off, but you can also put it back on fairly easily by aligning the pegs, and without any of the faceplates on, you can see even more of the hood detail. And of course, you could keep the hood off, but then the head looks a little weird. So let's first take a look at the serious face for a bit of comparison. And you can see that that fits. Just rip that off and put on the unmasked face. If she's looking like this, or looking straight, then she looks perfectly fine, right? But if she looks up, then you really start to notice how long her neck is. And on top of that, her hair isn't a flexible material, so it's not going to look natural if you pose it certain ways and would be moving. And because it's just the front of her face, in front of that, it looks unnatural from any other angle besides straight on. Which is a shame, because it does look good otherwise. So I think a lot of people end up saying that they would prefer to use one of the masks. And I do agree with them for the most part. And then of course there's the fact that if you remove the hood, then that really doesn't look right. It just doesn't look like it's the right size to me. See, the proportions are different. The unmasked face is actually smaller than her mask. If they were made to the same size, then it would look more proper. It would look like it fit better. But still, you'd have the problem with looking up in the neck. There are limits to what they can do, and I can understand that. For comparisons, let's do Figma Tiana Lannister. Gwen is taller, and she's to a slightly bigger scale. The high-grade Gundam Mark II with the Build Mark II pack. Pretty much standard high-grade size. He's almost as tall as Tiana there. and as a result, smaller than Spider-Gwen by about head and shoulders. Innocentia, and surprisingly about the same size. Her face appears to be in a slightly different size. When we take a look again at the Figma, that has an even smaller size face. If we take a look at the unmasked face again for size, it's pretty close to a Figma's. It might be even smaller. I think it's smaller than a Figma's face. Although it is hard to tell because this faceplate includes the hair, which is something that Figma plate and the Frame Armor Scroll doesn't. Those pieces are separate, but it looks like at most they're about the same size. SH Figuarts Ranma. There is a lot of difference in the construction of the two, I believe. And you can see in the waist especially, but also in the knee. This one has a big knee joint, which is especially visible from the back. And a lot of the joints, especially in the arms, are very visible. And these joints also do have some visibility, but I have to say that on certain levels it's not quite as bad. I mean, like, these are shiny, they call attention to themselves. These ones are matte, so they don't quite do that. But as well, Ranma here doesn't have a peg in her back, or a hole in the back for the peg on the display base. So you need to use a stand with a clamp for her, otherwise she won't stand. Or he won't stand, rather, since Ranma is a guy. And as well, he is significantly shorter than Spider-Gwen. Some final thoughts and impressions about this figure. I do quite like it. It's a great representation of the character both as Spider-Woman and as a version of Gwen Stacy. It does have a lot of character to it, and a lot of attitude can come through based on whatever poses that you choose. It is well executed both in sculpt and the painting, and despite the limitations of the joint system, you can still do quite a few things with it. It does also come with a great amount of accessories, even though you could probably ask for more. And there are ways that the Amazing Yamaguchi figure complex line could be improved over this with a few more of the lessons. I mean, like, you'll still have things like the shoulder joints there, which I'm not sure whether you could avoid, even if you really wanted to. And the sculpting and the painting still do look great, and it still does have great posability, all things considered. But there are a few things that do stick out as points that they could improve upon. For example, the unmasked face being in the wrong proportion for the rest of it, or even for Figma, considering how small it is. It wouldn't look right in certain poses, such as this one, other than her hair being so straight. It just doesn't fit the rest of the body, which is a shame, because I do like the way this is sculpted and painted and everything, and it does look very pretty, but it's not going to look right unless she's standing straight. And the other thing is that with some of the hands being so delicately sculpted, because you have the finger out and it's slightly flexible, there are some doubts as to the point of where it's going to break. So you're going to you're going to have to be careful with this when you're putting it on in order to secure it. And I was trying to be careful with this hand as I was putting it on in order to try to put it on properly. And I did, but it does take a while and it does take quite a bit of force. So do keep in mind that you are going to have to be careful if you want this to stay in some pretty good condition. But you do have some good stuff, and you can, apparently according to other reviews, mix it with some of the accessories from the others, for example, Spider-Man's other web shots. And still, you have a decent amount of accessories and they're well executed. And there's detail here that they didn't have to do, but they did, so that's great. In the end, I have to say that whether or not you get this can depend on whether or not you are a fan of the Spider-Man characters and their different variations, and whether or not you like Gwen herself, and whether or not you're not bothered by all of the different versions and everything else. And in that light, I would like to mention Gwenpool, because she's not a different version of Gwen Stacy. You know, she's not a Gwen Stacy. She's just a person from a universe like ours that has comic books, which she has read. So her only so-called power, having slipped into another universe, is her knowledge of the comic book worlds and characters. And yet she fell into the world of the comics, and she decided that the only way to ensure that she survived all of the different events that occur around the comics, you know, all these world-ending events, especially after Convergence, the only way to survive them was to become a hero herself. And so she got someone to make a costume for her, and because her name is Gwenpool, now that is her full name, she got a Deadpool-esque costume. But she doesn't have any powers at all, and she has a completely different personality. She is blonde, but that's where the similarities between her and Gwen Stacy end. I do believe that this is a good figure, and I would recommend it, especially if you can get it on sale. And between the painting, the sculpting, the accessories, I do think they're all pretty good. They could have improved the hood, made so that you could flip it back and have an entire masked head, or unmasked heads. But they chose what they could do in order to keep it within a certain price tag, and I do think that they did a good job. I also appreciate the fact that they included this kind of thing, this background here, so that you have something else to work with in addition to the figure itself and all of its plastic accessories. You don't always get a background, so that kind of thing is a detail that I can appreciate. That about it does it for this video. I do hope that you enjoyed it, and I hope that you found it informative and helpful. If you did enjoy it, if you did find it helpful, please do drop a comment below or a like. You can also show your support for my channel by subscribing and even going to my Patreon. So, that's it, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye-bye!